Yes, well, I'm Christopher G. Moore, and I'm back again today with my friend William Waite, psychiatrist, saxophone player extraordinaire, and friend.
And friend and writer extraordinaire, psychologist. And
so we're here picking up a few of the threads of conversation that we started yesterday, talking about a variety of things. So I know you've been thinking about a couple of things overnight.
Oh yeah, many things. Too many things.
Too many things.
Yeah, we're gonna need probably 300 or 400 gigs of.
Well, yeah, I think that basically the producers right now, by mentioning 200 or 300 gigs, you might want to bring the defibrillator to help them. But that's okay. I have to be careful not to rock the chair, not to slouch, not to be up too high, because otherwise I get these really dark, cloudy looks. But other than that, I think it's going to be fine. I mean, one of the things I want to talk about a little later is the relationship between creativity and destruction, the Shiva aspect from Hindu. And I know we've talked about this over lunch a number of times, and I thought it might be useful to share some of that with an audience.
I brought one thing in, which I think I gave you a copy of it. It's my Bible. And I've had it for probably 40, 45 years at this point. And it just, if I'm going to read anything except something new or a novel, I just keep coming back to this. What I'd like to do is just read the first paragraph. It's very short, and it's called the Shinchen Ming.
Yes. And
it's the third Zen patriarch. And I got this in one of the first meditation retreats I went to. The meditation master handed it out, and we talked a little bit about it. And then when I was in India, my Indian teacher spent several days talking about it. And I just find this to be amazing, so I'll give it to you. The great way, which you could call the truth, is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is a disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail.
Yeah, I like that. And I think in some ways it fits in a little bit when I was talking about this notion of creativity and destruction. I think we're in a time where there's an intensification of strong emotions like anger and hatred and envy. You see those being projected on social media, in the press, and elsewhere. And I think part of it has to do with we're far more creative at an accelerated rate than we've ever been. And to create is also to destroy. It's the Shiva thing.
Sure.
Because by creating something that's new, you're displacing something that people have held on to, whether it's a dogma, whether it's a belief, whether it's a process, a system of government, an ideology. Creativity questions those things, may make them obsolete, may make part of them irrelevant. And as a result, people who have placed their identity on the existing paradigm as the truth, as you were saying, holding on to that, suddenly are burning with anger and hatred and pushing back and cutting off heads and doing whatever they can to reclaim what is being destroyed in front of them.
Yeah, and underneath the thing itself is the identity, which is the thing that's really where the anger comes from. And of course, anger is secondary. Anger is always a secondary process. There's always disappointment, fear, not having your expectations met. That's always sitting there, and anger is the reactive function. And we treat anger as a thing in itself, which distorts the whole. Well, it's like creativity destroying. We could say it's destroying, but in a way that's not quite accurate, because creativity is transforming. It's taking some kind of energy and system and moving it into another one, because energy doesn't get destroyed. It can only translate into something else. And as you were saying, if a person is caught in an image, a belief system, whatever it is, and they're rigidified around it, then there's the reaction. If a person has a little bit more availability, they're not quite as rigidified, then they're open to the potential of learning or creativity. And that's where things get very interesting. The whole business of the singularity, people are starting to line up for or against. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution, which cuts the world in half. And the world is not cut in half. It's one of the insanities that is a necessary tool in order to function in the world. But it's not true. It's sort of like, I forget where I was. Somebody was talking on TV, and they were saying, I've flown across the country dozens of times, and I've never seen those little lines between the states.
Sure.
So we have, various illusions, whether they be mental constructs or even emotional constructs that we utilize, that we get rigidified around.
And it goes back to Alan Watts. I mean, he said, I think very eloquently, the menu isn't the meal. That, with words and music, we're so used to dealing with representations that we presume that the representation is the reality.
Yeah.
It's like a general in the war room with all of the little tanks and the missiles and the soldiers there to, in a sense, simulate what the battlefield is.
Sure.
But that's not the battlefield.
Yeah, the map is not the territory.
The map is not the territory. And, Georges Borges did a brilliant essay about this. The map that has so much detail that the map is the size of the territory.
Right, yeah.
And what we look for is, in that representation, we kind of get lost in a way in representations. And there's this whole notion of hyper-reality, right? And where the hyper-reality, a kind of a Disneyland, Eiffel Tower, and canals of Venice, etc., where we blur the line between reality and fiction, where it no longer becomes clear what is real and what's not.
Right.
And in some ways, when I look at a little bit of what I see about the singularity, it is taking us into kind of a virtual reality.
Exactly. I was thinking virtual when you said hyper.
Yeah. And then that virtual reality becomes a substitute in a way for the reality.
Yeah.
And I think that's where somehow, I've been thinking about this overnight, is where the resistance point is going back to what is the fundamental nature of the species. And one of the fundamental natures, you just open a newspaper, which is right in front of you, it's tribalism. Tribalism wears all kinds of different phases and masks. Yesterday we were talking about the 41,000 denominations.
Right, yeah.
That's a symptom of tribalism, cooking up ways that the tribe can find consensus, that can cooperate, and it makes evolutionary sense, because the tribes that could cooperate the best would have the most children, would survive.
Sure.
Over other tribes where everyone was doing their own thing, but there weren't many children surviving out of that tribe. They got lost.
Right.
So basically, dogma and ideology are crude ways of social cooperation that we're in the process of outgrowing as a species. But we're not quite there. And the question is whether we're capable of exceeding what are maybe the species brain limitations. We are tribal as a people. We have outsiders. People hate people with a different color of skin or a different religion or a different way of looking at the universe, you know?
Well, if we can't get past that point, we're not going to get very much further. I think the plus side of it and the kind of the positive is that there is the fact of specieshood, and tribalism has evolved through culture, and culture is basically hypnosis.